Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to South Sudan Eagle Media TV. My guest for this evening, Dr. Jok Madut Jok and Dr. Awolich, members of PCCA. Welcome to South Sudan Eagle Media. And thank you for those of you who are watching in Facebook, YouTube, and Clubhouse. Please start sharing. Our topic today is we will talk about the issues going on in the country, in South Sudan, in our country. The current issue that happening, the main topic we will discuss tonight is about the SPLA-IO is pulling out from the agreement. So these two gentlemen will analyze what's going on. Then before we start our discussion, let me give the floor back to Dr. Jok Madut to introduce himself, and then Dr. Awolich.
Hello to all of you listeners and viewers. I'm Jok Madut Jok. I'm a professor of anthropology at Syracuse University in New York State in America.
Thank you, Dr. Jok Madut. And Awolich?
Yes, I'm Awolich. I'm a member of the People's Coalition for Civil Action, PCCA.
Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me tonight, this night at South Sudan. We're having a breaking news going on. I see in the news that SPLA-IO, they are pulling out from the security. So what is going on? Awolich, can you go on clarify for us to South Sudanese what happening between the SPLA-IO and the government?
Thank you very much, Abraham Madut, for hosting us this evening and night in our home area. And I want to appreciate the Eagle Media platform for providing the space for people to dialogue and have discussion. The topic that we are discussing today is very relevant in the lives of the ordinary people of South Sudan, which is, it has to do with the peace agreement. And like you, I was not surprised at all, but I became concerned that the SPLM-IO, in light of growing incidents of attacks on its forces and its cantonment areas, it's decided to suspend its participation in the peace implementation mechanisms. But it did not pull out of the government, but they pull out of all the peace implementation mechanisms that include the revitalized joint evaluation and monitoring commission, which is the highest body that oversees the implementation of the peace agreement, and all the other security related mechanisms like Citizen VM, Joint Defense Board, and other security related matters. And this is linked to lack of implementation of the revitalized peace agreement. And we have been very vocal, especially those of us members of the PCCA and other civil society organizations. We have been very, very vocal about the fact that there was no political will and there was no commitment among the leaders, specifically President Salva Kiir Mayardit and his security officers. They are not interested in implementing the peace agreement, and they have been violating it left and right. But people think that when we say this, we are carrying out propaganda. What we wanted at that time was for people to realize, while we still have time, to realize that agreement is not being implemented, so that they can demand its implementation, so that by the time we arrive at a critical moment like this, we would have accomplished the provisions of the agreement. Now, the SPLM-IO has been quiet, even though they have the knowledge that the other party, which is the government, has been peeling away soldiers from their side. They have been sponsoring one defection after another, and SPLM-IO has been quiet. Now that it has become so critical for them that their soldiers are being killed in the cantonment sites, they had to take this measure, and I think it is a reasonable measure to take, even though it risks returning the country to war. But they are a major member of the peace agreement, and they should tell the people of South Sudan that the agreement is not being implemented, and instead of declaring war and going back to the bush, taking action such as this raise the stakes high, and maybe those who are hesitant to implement the peace agreement will now see that there is danger inherent in failing to implement the peace agreement. So I totally agree with the actions that the SPLM-IO has taken to suspend its operation or participation in those mechanisms as an attempt to raise the stakes and to make sure that people are able to honestly implement the agreement. Thank you very much.
Dr. Jok Madut Jok, it's your turn.
Okay, thank you, Abraham, for the opportunity once again to be on Eagle Media. As Abraham has clearly stated, what happened when SPLA-IO declared their withdrawal from the security arrangement part of the peace agreement. This was long in the making. It was only a matter of time before they reached this conclusion, because every obstacle has been thrown on the path of the implementation of the peace agreement by the central partner in the agreement, which is the government of South Sudan under President Salva Kiir Mayardit. You will recall that there was always talk about having no money to implement some vital clauses of the agreement, most particularly the security arrangement. There was no money to canton soldiers. This was the message we heard since 2018 when the agreement was signed. Even at the same time as there was no money, the government was able to procure 1,000 vehicles, top line of SUVs from Japan to facilitate the movement of the president from Juba to Bahr Ghazal. 1,000 vehicles at $100,000 each. All of that could have paid for the cantonment in one go. And yet we could see nothing in this but a matter of time before the peace agreement is frustrated, to the point where in the end the government will feel a desire to ask for extension of the interim period, which is what the government is currently gearing toward. And you will see this is what they will do. There will be no elections. There will be no constitution making. There will be no unification of the army. There will be no money for this and that. All of it a delaying tactic and feet dragging on the peace agreement, so that partners in the agreement are frustrated into abandoning that agreement, which I think the government sees as victory to itself, but which most people of South Sudan of sense see as a declaration of return to war in essence. And we fear that IO's withdrawal from security arrangement mechanisms as only a step toward many steps that will come, leading to a possibility of the collapse of the peace agreement and potentially a return to war. And we want to caution IO that they have done a good thing by withdrawing from the peace agreement, not from the peace agreement, but from the security arrangement part of the peace agreement. But should not opt for a return to war, because the contest over power, which is the thing that is derailing the peace agreement, can still be done peacefully, can be achieved peacefully. And the way they are doing it now by saying we either implement the peace agreement or we call it quits, and or we look for other ways to negotiate about this. And I think this is what is going to happen. Either you sit down and renegotiate, or we pull out and see what, because the government has been incentivizing defections. This is the luring factions of the IO onto government side as a way to weaken and draw down IO's military strength, such that in the end you can simply ignore what IO is saying, because you will feel confident that they no longer have a military force to reckon with. And I think this is just doing a great disservice to the people of South Sudan, who are so desperate for peace and desperate for governance, for justice, for welfare, which they cannot get now because the country is essentially at war.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jok Madut. You know, I read and I see in the news today that the last weekend there was a fight going on in Upper Nile in a containment site. And IO, they sent out that letter out that they are pulling out. Is this a sign of South Sudan going back to war again with the SPLA-IO? We have less than a year left for the election to take place next year. And now they it seems like the two parties, they are not on the same page. And you see the security arrangement is one of the challenging now two parties are facing, and they are not agreeing on how to unify the forces. So if this security arrangement is not in place, and you see there is a fight in Upper Nile, what will be the outcome, and what the international community will say about this? And is it peace? Ours it will be die before even election next year approach. So what do you guys think, gentlemen? Job, go ahead. Dr. Job, go ahead.
Okay, well, I think we are all hoping against hope that this does not necessarily lead to a return to an all-out war. This would be disastrous for the country, for the people who have been burdened by war since 2013 and many years beyond. A return to war at this hour will also keep mean that the little sliver of hope that the South Sudanese have been holding on to, that their country would eventually become a peaceful country, would be snuffed out by a return to war at this hour. It will also mean potential for disintegration of this country. You already saw, we've been seeing ethnic divides and killings and raiding. You've seen reports of people from cattle keepers from Bor being in conflict with people from Acholi land over the movement of cattle and destruction of crops and so forth. I think you've seen recently the attack on lakes from people in eastern Warap and eastern Tonj. We are hearing stories of continuation of violence in all corners of the country. I think a return to war at this hour will just be a total disaster. I think, so let's make use of this opportunity to appeal to our people, our leaders, particularly who are those holding public office, to really prioritize the welfare of the country. For a return to war at this hour will mean basically a beginning of a process of losing the country. And some people have talked about Somaliization of South Sudan, or a volcanization of South Sudan. These are not easy things to stomach for someone who believes strongly in the ability of South Sudanese to live together in one united, prosperous country. I think this should also be a clarion call to all South Sudanese that they've got to speak up and take their country back from the hands of these warring leaders, warring factions in the country, and really demand justice and demand change, including demand political transition. If the parties to RCs are not willing to use the mechanisms of the peace agreement to drive for transition, to a peaceful transition, I think the people of South Sudan have got to take this into their own hands and really demand change by popular protest, by peaceful protest. and tell the leaders who are running the country today that they have reached the end of the road when it comes to ideas about transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jok. Abraham Walich.
Yeah, thank you. I think I agree with Professor Jok that first of all, that it is not too late to pull out of this potential disaster. The SPLM-IO has not pulled out of the agreement, and they have not pulled out of the government, but they have pulled out of the security mechanism because of repeated violations of the ceasefire. So I think there is still room for the region and the people of South Sudan to appeal to the leaders to not to return the country to an all-out war. We are already at war technically, but it is not a large-scale, widespread military confrontation. But those ethnic conflicts are part of the broader power struggle in South Sudan. And so I agree in that regard. Second, I think that the burden of getting the agreement on the track is with President Kiir. And if South Sudan is to be at peace or at war, the decision is with President Kiir. And the reason is simple. His posture tells a tale of trying to overpower his rival, which is Dr. Riek Machar. And when you do things like that, you try to alter the calculation of the other party. This is part, like within any country, the power, the equation between one country and another must remain balanced at some point. But if one party is seen as arming itself, then you have to question, who are they going to be fighting? I am their opponent. So we saw over 100 vehicles were purchased recently for the police. And the police is not unified. And it is one part of the police. And it was agreed that no party should be arming the other. You should not arm yourself, because then you can trigger a security dilemma. So we think that what will tell whether the IO and the government are not going to get into a fight is the posture of each party. This evening around 7 p.m. in Juba, we heard that there was a scrimmage just outside Juba between the IO forces and the government forces, somewhere under the hill, somewhere there. There is a place called Jebel Chup, so I don't know, but we got the report that there was a shootout there. Why? Because of the posture. So when the political leaders are having some disagreement, then the soldiers follow their cues, and so we are very close to going to war if the situation doesn't change. And so it is our best hope that it doesn't get to that. But if we continue, if the current behavior remains, which is the unwillingness to implement the agreement, the efforts to undermine the other parties so that they become weaker politically and militarily, and if you continue to acquire weapons and your opponent doesn't have the capacity to acquire weapons, then you are changing the political and military reality on the ground. And the other party is likely to react in their self-interest. They will likely react violently so that you can reset the political landscape using the military equation. So this is what needs to be prevented. And as far as the region is concerned, and those who are, and the international community, it is unfortunate to say, but I can tell you that the only thing that is likely to happen is somebody is going to issue a statement saying, okay, we are calling for calm and we want people to be reasonable and to do the right thing, and we condemn this, we condemn that. But that is very much all you get. Nobody is going to make a lot of efforts to prevent fighting. And so South Sudan is likely going back to slide back to the conflict, because I don't believe that there is honesty in the implementation of the peace agreement. And all along for the last 8 months, this is what we have been telling the people of South Sudan. Nobody seemed to listen to us, but we have been warning people that, because if the agreement failed to be implemented, what is the end goal? What happens? It's not just going to be a picnic in Nyakuren Cultural Center, or it is not just going to be a party in Freedom Hall to say, oh, the agreement has failed and now let us celebrate. No, it's going to be war. And that is why we wanted to warn people in advance that this attitude, this behavior is going to lead the country back to conflict. And I think that reality is now closer than it was when we won. But it is still our prayer that common sense will prevail, that the leaders will take steps to assure each other, to assure their security, and to keep the people of South Sudan from returning to large-scale war. We are already at war. I want to emphasize that. It is a large-scale kind of fighting, as we have seen before in Juba and Malakal, that is not taking place. Nobody is trying to capture a city. But the violations that took place recently in Upper Nile, in Joko and other places near my wood area, have involved the SPLM, the South Sudan Defense Forces taking over about 2 to 3 towns by the SPLM-IO. And that is the type of conflict that you don't want to see. Thank you.
I mean, even if there was no large-scale military confrontation, the fact that some of the principal partners in the agreement, President Kiir and Vice President Riek Machar, facing off in this manner on a daily basis, in itself it brings a great deal of damage to the country. It means that nobody is going to let down their guard and go about their daily business, because they will be smelling blood every day.
That's right.
It means that the work of running the state will no longer be done. People will be focusing on this threat. It will mean that the country's army will no longer be doing the business of protecting the country from outside aggression, which we are seeing a lot of. You see, Sudan armed forces are attacking people in Abyei, and the National Defense Forces of South Sudan are not able to protect their people. Not to speak of all the other contested areas around the country that the National Army is not able to be available to protect, because everybody is now eyeing what is going to come out of this face-off between President Kiir and Vice President Riek Machar. And I think the country doesn't have to go into a big confrontation. The country is just going to be in the same simmering conflict that does not allow people to do their ordinary businesses. Trade will not happen. Law and order is likely to break down, because now people are being killed in these attacks by SSPDF over IO, and the tension between people in major towns as a result of this is going to be every day imminent. And I think it's damaging the country ever more.
Thank you, Dr. Jok. Let me welcome Ustaz Rajab Mandis. Ustaz Rajab, I think you, if you can hear me, I will give a chance to him. So before we do that, I have few things that we should talk about the BA and Twitch issues, and also we will be talking about the recent issues going on in Sudan. That there is an incident going on there was a few days ago. There was a group of Sudanese attack South Sudanese there in Khartoum. So we will be talking about that. Before we go there, Usas Rajab Mandis, welcome to South Sudan Eagle Media. So I would like you to weigh in on this breaking news going on in IO and South Sudan government. So the pulling out of IO. So you one of the signature of peace agreement that signed in Addis Ababa. So what do you think about this current event? Fadal.
We cannot hear you, big man.
Okay. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Comrade Madit and my colleagues and friends, Awolich and Professor Jok Madut. Good. Well, this is indeed is a breaking news, but of course not a surprising one, given the reasons that the SPLM-AIO advanced for its withdrawal from the peace mechanisms. And I was in RJMEC since its reconstitution in towards the end of 2018 when the agreement was signed, and all along these mechanisms have not been effectively responding to concerns being raised by the different parties. You would see that the parties would, the meetings of these mechanisms would be held, especially for RJMEC, which is in charge of oversight and evaluation of the whole agreement. All the other mechanisms report to this mechanism, to RJMEC. And in the meetings, they would present recommendations, they would present concerns affecting the implementation process with lots of recommendations from the security mechanisms. In fact, in my view, the security mechanisms did the best job in trying to make the agreement work. In terms of containing the forces, maintaining them to a degree of discipline in the cantonment and training sites, that they coexisted peacefully. But they had a lot of plans they drew out to try to implement this transitional security arrangements. Unfortunately, most of this would only end at the floor of the plenary sessions of RJMEC, because number one, the resolutions of these meetings are not implemented largely, and secondly, institutions like the National Transitional Committee, which used to be the pre-transitional committee, were not actually also taking these meetings seriously. Throughout this period of implementation, since the agreement was signed, the chairperson of the National Pre-Transitional Committee, which later became the National Transitional Committee, attended the RJMEC meetings, to my knowledge, only once. And that's the mechanism that was supposed to be in charge of implementation of all the transitional security arrangements. So it was supposed to be funding these mechanisms and also overseeing their work. Now, the chairperson spends most of his time, especially in the Sudanese peace process, and doesn't focus more on these processes. And doesn't present reports and engage with all these mechanisms. In fact, some of the mechanisms would report that it took them several months struggling to meet with the chair of the National Transitional Committee, but that was not happening. And so most of the challenges being presented and being recommended for solutions were not being addressed. So this now indicates to us clearly the difficulty with the implementation. And so one would say it clarifies the fact that the agreement is in a very, very bad shape. And unless the parties make an effort to really respond to this, otherwise the agreement would simply finally stop making any form of progress. And the challenge is immense on especially the civil population in terms of safety and security, and increasing desperation of humanitarian situation in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Ustaz Rajab Mandis. Yeah, so actually, I see the token like Norway's and others, Norway's and British, they pull out. They send out their statement saying that the United States and United Kingdom and Norway's in joint statement on Wednesday condemning the report attack by the South Sudan People Defense Forces on South Sudan People Liberation Movement SPLA-IO and position. So, what do you think about the ADICONO peace agreement and this international community? What they will think about this violation of peace agreement? What do you think will happen? Are they going to put more sanction on South Sudan government or not?
Well, there may be a possibility of a sanction, but the major concern here is that the international, the regional and the international communities, supporting the implementation of the peace agreement, are also not doing enough. This statement would not have come if the SPLM-AIO did not withdraw from these mechanisms. Even when the parties, these bodies were fully aware that these attacks were taking place. But again, the unfortunate part of it was that the citizens of South Sudan have been going through all these attacks and challenges, and all the insecurity and the rest of this, which are directly failures of the peace agreement. But we didn't see such strong statement, any strong statements coming out in a way of responding appropriately and timely to get these issues addressed. Now, if you see in the statements, they are asking for investigation to see if those attacks constituted violations of the peace agreement. There is no attack that does not constitute violation. All attacks constitute violation. And so this statement simply came after SPLM-IO withdrew from the mechanisms. Otherwise, it was likely that these attacks would continue and there was going to be no serious statement on that. And again, these bodies do not seem to really care much about the level of challenges that the agreement is going through. In fact, with all the indications that we have, including the report that was produced by the IO recently, providing an evaluation of the peace agreement, you would see clearly that this agreement is now directly responsible for the suffering of the people of South Sudan. The deliberate failure to implement this agreement is now causing all this mess we have in the country, the insecurity, the fighting among civilians in different parts of the country. It's partly because the state has not developed sufficient capacity as provided for in the agreement to protect the citizens. And as this continues with all these delays and failures to consistently implement the agreement, the suffering would only continue on the civil population. And so sitting around the agreement pretending that it is working is actually being complacent to the deliberate failures of the implementation and therefore the consequences of that on the civil population. So I don't see how these statements are in a way going to help because these are statements that have been coming out since the agreement was signed nearly 42 months ago, and we have had all this situation deteriorating without the parties doing much. They are actually immune to these statements now. What they need, honestly, is something different from statements. There is need for more robust response of the region, particularly that is, directly the mediator and also grantor to the to the peace agreement.
Thank you, Ustaz Rajab. Dr. Jok Madut, do you want to add something into that?
Yeah, I want to add that the situation in the country, most particularly the ever increasing demise of the state, and ever increasing inability to monopolize the use of state power to protect citizens and to punish other citizens who hurt other citizens. The lack of that means that it should have sent a message to the Troika, to the regional organizations like IGAD, to already start talking about there being no peace agreement since it is not being implemented. Instead, what the international community has done, and the Troika are probably the biggest failures in this, is to always vouch for an agreement which is essentially no longer an agreement, and making it look like there is hope that this agreement will still live and that peace will come. In essence, giving an extra credibility which it does not have, and we who are ordinary citizens of that country observing this dynamic would have we have been expecting the Troika and IGAD and the AU to declare the peace agreement dead, basically, long ago, so that people can move on to something else. Because now it seems Troika and IGAD and AU and other international organizations are simply standing behind a failed process. Meanwhile, the citizens of that country are suffering. As we are going into the middle of the year and the usual lean season where there is no food, you will hear that there will be a lot of hunger. And it is going to be different this time. In the years past, hunger and famines have always been in the rural areas, far away from where people can access markets, or places that are hard to reach by humanitarian. But this time around, there is going to be urban hunger. This time around, people will be dying in towns. And I think the international community that has been finding itself being a partner in the implementation of the peace agreement has to come out clearly to say that the leaders of South Sudan are not serious about the peace agreement, and see what else can be done rather than us waiting behind a failed process. Thank you.
Let me add something small to this, Chief Madit.
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, the way our citizens suffer under the stalled peace process, if this were citizens of the countries that continue to claim that the agreement is working, they would have declared the agreement dead by now. But this indicates that no one cares how many of our citizens die. As long as it is ourselves, there's no problem. And that's why you find people still standing with the agreement, pretending that it is actually working when it's not. The progress in the implementation is extremely limited, and the suffering of the people is immense. All of this are attributed to the inconsistent failure of implementation of the peace agreement. So we believe that there is really negligence on this, and I would say if also our case is taken serious, like we see the recent case of Ukraine, we would have made so serious progress on this. So there is very limited attention to the scale of the failure and of the agreement and its resulting consequences on the civil population. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadr Jamanis. Abraham Awolich, you want to add more into it before I move to the next?
I think they have captured it well. So let's move on to other things.
Okay. Abraham Awolich, I would like to ask you a job about a couple of weeks ago. I remember that you guys released a memo. Can you can you tell us more about that memo? Can you talk about it?
Well, the memo has three parts. So we wrote to IGAD, basically saying that both the revitalized agreement and the government that was put in place by the agreement have failed, and that it was time for IGAD to reconsider other options in the country. For example, we have said that these violations of the peace agreement, fighting here and there, encouraging defections here and there, stoking ethnic violence here and there, all of them amount to the violation of the peace agreement. And IGAD has been silent. And we said also in the memo, we said that part of the problem is the definition or the framing of the issue. What is the issue at hand in South Sudan? Is it power struggle alone? No, it is not power struggle alone. There has been state failure. There has also been leadership failure. And these two elements, which are a result of leadership failure, both the failure of state and lack of peace in the country are a result of leadership failure. So we are saying that IGAD mediation had reduced the whole issue to power struggle between two people, and therefore, if you were to give each person some piece of the pie, the whole thing will be fine. So that is one thing that we've pointed out, that that it was not entirely the best way to frame the issue. Number two, we have also said that the parties to the agreement were actually not equal. And if you want to make an agreement to be implementable, there has to be a cost to each party that will violate the peace agreement. And we think that the revitalized peace agreement has no consequence whatsoever for the violators. Neither international sanction on those who violate the peace agreement, nor sufficient power among the opposition to threaten the violation of the agreement. There is no cost that is imposed on the violators. And the government is aware of this, especially President Kiir. So he has been slowly but surely killing and violating the peace agreement with no cost. The only reason we managed to get the peace agreement was because we created an artificial stalemate in Addis Ababa through international pressure. You know, the United States was threatening sanctions here, UN imposing arms embargo, and individuals being identified as obstacle to peace being given sanctions. So that created sufficient pressure, in addition to the opposition threatening to fight. That created sufficient pressure or sufficient stalemate to enable the peace agreement to be signed. But once the agreement was signed, that pressure dissipated and everybody went home. They went to do other things. And there was nothing, so there was no counterweight there was no cost left for anyone to violate the peace agreement. You know, every law must have a cost if it is violated. You know, you drive in the United States and you are told that there is a speed limit on the street. If you drive above that speed limit, there is a cost, both legal penalty on you and also financial. And so you will go ahead anyway and violate it, and you will be punished. That is what we are talking about. So in a peace agreement, there must be a cost to those who will decide to violate. And if there is no cost, then you really have no peace agreement. And so that is basically what we have been arguing. We have been saying that there is no guarantor in this for this agreement. Bashir was one guarantor and Museveni on the other hand. But these are not grantors that could impose cost on the parties. These are grantors that say, I'm a friend of this, you are a friend of that. Let us agree to sign this agreement. If you threaten this, I will support this. This was the basis of that. That has long since ceased to exist. Not there. Bashir is gone, and Museveni has his own issues at home after the last election. So technically, there is no guarantor for this agreement. And so that is one thing that we pointed out. And there was no other remedy that was built into the agreement such that if the parties violated because of lack of cost, maybe you could have factored in citizens being part of this. But IGAD didn't do that. And so we are saying the fault is not on the side of IGAD. They did their best to try to resolve the conflict in South Sudan. We only fault them for a focus by the mediation on power struggle. When you know that the power struggle is a result of failure, both from the state side and on the leadership side. So you don't address those two, you address one, you haven't done anything. And so that is one thing. But we are saying that now it is not too late. Since the agreement is there and it has been violated, it's going to collapse anyway, why don't we prevent? Why don't we do a preemptive action by calling for a comprehensive political dialogue among all the political forces in the country? Why don't we agree on a new security arrangement that covers everybody? Anyone who claims to have an army, let them be part of it. But now you will need an international sanction to raise the cost. That means you need the support of IGAD and the African Union and the UN Security Council. And you will need a neutral body of international military experts authorized by the UN to help the parties to organize the army and to implement the security arrangement. So we are saying that is needed. While you are doing that, you then get into political dialogue. The agreement is not viable now to bring everybody on board. And the parallel
or threaten to pull away from standing behind this failed process.
Exactly.
IGAD and Troika, they should realize that their good name is also being dragged down in the eyes of the South Sudanese. And to save their image and their face, they should say, we have tried to push the parties to implement peace agreement and we have failed. And we are pulling back. If they did that, they would have spoken on behalf of the people of South Sudan, instead of standing there and vouching and pushing and legitimizing a process that is not going to earn any results.
Absolutely, Professor. So that is exactly the central theme of our argument, that we don't tell us, we are the South Sudanese, we know the agreement is not working. That's why we are still in the cantonment sites. That's why we are still in the refugee camps. That's why Rajab Mandis and I are not talking in Juba. So we don't tell us that the agreement is working. We know it is not. And if it is not, you cannot say that it is the only. And this is one of the common statements that you would hear from the UN, from anybody saying the peace agreement is the only mechanism for achieving sustainable peace in South Sudan. Unfortunately, it is not. It is not a sustainable nor a viable mechanism for sustaining peace in South Sudan. It has no cost for violators. And therefore, if you want to make it a framework for peace, then you have to widen it. We are not saying throw it all away. We are saying let us renegotiate it. It has failed. And let us talk about what will happen in 11 months. We have tried from 2018, that is 19, 20, 21, and now 22. That is 4 years since the signing of the agreement. We have tried to make it work. It's not working. We are now left with nearly 9 months or 10 months until it comes to an end. Let us talk about that. Let us talk about what happens when the peace agreement ends. We are not even talking about its implementation anymore. It's not implemented, but it is also ending. So there are two issues. It is ending and it has failed. And instead of waiting until the last day, why don't we talk now? Why don't we do the dialogue now? So I will allow Rajab to highlight, and maybe Professor Jok might have read the PCCA memo. He could also add his views. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah,
Thank you very
go
much.
ahead. Yeah.
Yes, good. Well, we are exactly where we were by 2016 when the agreement stagnated and was not making progress. But you would hear the regional body, IGAD, and also the international community still putting out statements congratulating the parties for progress in the implementation of the agreement, and also mentioning one or two things that happened and taking that as a major milestone in the implementation. And so this went on for a very long time, even when South Sudanese were saying that the agreement was no longer working. For those of us who were moving around the country as civil society leaders, engaging with citizens, you would hear them asking us questions. Is there still an agreement being implemented anyway? And so that's exactly where we are, where we are now. Things are not making progress, and the citizens are suffering and dying and getting displaced all this time. But still, those supporting the agreement continue to say things are working. But in terms of the memo, we also went on to recommend, in fact, that the country is not prepared for elections. As they were saying, that they were going to hold elections by the end of the transitional period. The country is completely unprepared for that in terms of the level of insecurity in the country, the displacements, and all the challenges. In terms of legal and institutional frameworks, all these have not been put in place, and therefore the possibility of holding credible democratic elections by the end of the transitional period. And again, an extension is not warranted in this case either, because you would need an extension if the parties were actually seriously implementing the agreement. Now that this is not being implemented, why do they need an extension? In fact, they don't deserve an extension, because an extension would simply mean an extension of the stalemate, and also, and most seriously, an extension of the suffering of the people of South Sudan. So both elections and extension of the status quo at the moment by the end of the transitional period are both unwarranted. And so there is need for what Awolich correctly mentioned, a political dialogue to ensure that there is a new arrangement for transition rather than what we have currently. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Jok Madut, do you want to add anything?
I mean, what is the measure of a working peace agreement? At the end of the day, how do you measure it? If you want to measure it by the fact that the elite have walked into their posh offices while the rest of the population rot away in misery, fine, you can say the peace agreement is working. But if our people are dying like flies in all corners of the country, what do you use to measure the viability of a peace agreement at the end of the day? And we think there is a peace agreement when people are suffering in the way they are? Certainly not. But the question I would like to ask is directed to us South Sudanese ourselves, because we have relinquished our fate to both the failed government in Juba and to the international community, and we have not really unified our ranks to ask ourselves, what can we do to salvage our country from this mess? Relying on the international community is not going to deliver us. Relying on the government is not going to deliver us. So what gives? And I think it is time for South Sudanese to really genuinely brainstorm on what can they do to rescue the country and to move the country out of this morass and to prevent continued death and continued downward spiral of our economy and the destruction of our resources, of our environment, people dying in the oil fields from pollution, people fighting over grazing land, people using revenge as a way to get justice, and so forth and so on. How long can we, as a people, continue to hemorrhage in such a ghastly way simply because we are expecting the international community to come to our rescue, and we are expecting this failed government to become a national government at the end of the day and have the welfare of our people at heart? Certainly not. I think time is now for South Sudanese to start thinking together about what they can do to help their country emerge from this mess.
Thank you, Dr. Jok Madut. You know, you talk about the conflict. The country, South Sudan now, there's every corner in South Sudan, there's a war going on. Commercial people from Lake State to Equatoria. Let us, my next question, we need to switch to the issues happening a few weeks ago in central and eastern Equatoria between cattle hustlers and the community of Mugui, for example. I warn you, Dr. Jok Madut and Awolich, you guys need to wait in this. This was one of the heartbreaking moments. See how the innocent civilian was killed. Many people lost their life in that part, in the Eastern Equatoria, in Mugui area. What do you say about the cattle keepers, the way that they came to Eastern Equatoria, and then the cattle keepers went in violently, killing the innocent civilian in the village? What will be support the government of South Sudan supposed to do to prevent civilian casualties? Jok Madut and then Awolich.
Okay. No, you are right, Madit, describing that those incidents in Eastern Equatoria as heartbreaking, because that's exactly what they are. But they are also telling us something else, which is that the government has failed to monopolize the use of justice system, of equitable distribution of resources, of protection of civilians, such that those cattle keepers from Jonglei who moved to Magui were running from other citizens who were also threatening to hurt them. They were running away from flooding, which has killed a lot of people and destroyed a lot of property. And there was no response from the state to help people survive the flooding and to help people settle their conflicts without too much death. The result was that citizens who were running aimlessly from a crisis went to an area where they got into a conflict with the local population because the state was not there to monitor, to supervise how IDPs get settled by host communities. And as a result, conflict erupted between these communities, which has given some local people in Eastern Equatoria a suspicion that these cattle keepers who came from Jonglei are certainly coming this far because they are being sponsored by some people in the army. Because how otherwise are they able to arm themselves with these heavy weapons, which they are using in the conflict with the local community? It is all that suffering that happens at that level and everywhere else in the country is a fundamental failure of the state, fundamental failure of the leadership of the state. And if these problems are to be resolved at this hour, for me personally, it needs an overhaul of the state, removal of the current government, or a major transformation of the current government to take up the fundamental responsibilities of the state. Citizens cannot be expected to resolve their own conflicts on their own when there are institutions of the state which are tasked with the responsibility to dispense justice. And yet we are now living in a situation looking like what European philosophers described as a state of nature, where it is war of all against all, where there is no state to mediate between citizens. What happens in that situation is that people will continue to use revenge and violence as a way to get justice. And in that regard, you don't have a society, you don't have a country, you have no nation. It's a state of nature. And yet the people who are holding office in Juba continue to describe themselves as leaders or government leaders or institutional leaders when there is none. They are nothing of that sort. Otherwise, people will not be dying the way they are without even a comment, even a statement, even an expression of sympathy with the victims coming out of State House. That's just not a way to run a state.
Well, thank you, Professor. I think this you got it, Professor. That's it. First of all, we have to acknowledge that Africa is largely occupied by three major communities. The first are the farmers, people whose main livelihood is farming. And you have the pastoralists, people whose main livelihood is raising of cattle. And then you have traders, people whose main livelihood is to live in the market. Those three communities, you go to any country, you find them. And so you go to Congo DRC, there are cattle headers, and there are these other two communities. You go to Kenya, it's the same. You go to Ethiopia, you go to Egypt. Wherever you go, these three modes of livelihood are exercised in Africa. And there are problems, obviously. But each state, depending on its capacity, is able to manage those relations. So the whole point of a state is to organize and to supervise social relations between people. And so this issue of cattle headers in Equatoria is a social relations issue. And it is a responsibility of the government to regulate social relations. And the reason is simple. So already in communities that are neighbors, they have already done their social organization. They know my neighbor has cows, I'm a farmer. But this is how we relate. But now you have other communities who don't have neighbors who are farmers, who are cattle keepers. And now you go into their communities and you have no established social relations already. Obviously, the first instance, if the state doesn't organize how you relate, is conflict. It's like, what are you doing here? Why are you in my area? I don't know you. We have no relationship. We have no intermarriages. And so you should anticipate a shock because that's a human and a normal human nature. If I go with my family as an individual, I will be welcome. But if I go with my entire community into a new neighborhood, people will be suspicious. They will be like, okay, so what is going on here? We don't know these people. What do they want? And they are threatening. They have weapons. This is what is happening in Eastern and Central Equatoria. In Eastern Equatoria, of course, the Mahdi corridor and the Asholi area, these are people who they farm. They are not cattle keepers. If you had gone to the Toposa land and to the Didinga and Boya and some parts of Latuko, these are cattle keepers. The relationship can easily be managed, either in a conflict or in peace. But now you come to Central Equatoria, the Kuku areas, the Lulubo areas, and the Acholi and Mahdi, that corridor, these are agricultures. These are people that have limited interaction with a lot of cows. And it can extend even all the way to Lanya. There are people who are there now. So the relationship is a new relationship. And so what should have happened, the government should have come in to regulate that relationship and to explain to the host community why these people are moving. And as Professor Jok has mentioned, there are three main reasons people are running away from their area. Part of it is cattle raiding. And that cattle raiding has two elements. You want to move your cattle away so that they are not raided, but you have also stolen other people's cows and you want to hide them. So you have to run into an area that is not accessible. And then you have the floods. And so for the people who live in the Equatoria, they need to know that we have two major seasons, those who are heading cattle. So during the dry season, we move into the Sud, into the Toj area. But now there is no Toj, there is no Sud, it's gone, it's water. So during the dry season, there is nothing. And so as a good cattle keeper, your main job is to go where you can find pasture. So that is part of what is driving these people. And then the third element is disease. And especially around lakes and the southeastern lakes and Jonglei, there has been this East Coast fever. It kills thousands of cattle. So some people are running away from that to preserve the herd they have. Now, that being the case, is it the fault of the communities that are hosting those people? It is not their fault. It's not the fault of the cattle herders. It's the nature, and that is where the state should have come in to regulate this relationship and to say, okay, this number of people we cannot manage. We cannot accommodate this number of cows in this neighborhood. So please, you move in this direction. And while you are here, please respect this and respect that. And here are the rules. If you violate this, there is a cost for that. This is what is required from the state. And the state has completely failed in this. And so beside that fact, there is also another element. There is politics. The country is at war already. And communities are aligned to different political factions within the country. And so if you come to a neighborhood and you are heavily armed, you can easily be suspected as having alignment with another faction, which the other community doesn't like. And that being the case, then you are a threat to them. So that political element is also there. It should be considered. And so, those things are interacting together at once. And of course, the dire economic situation in the country is feeding into this. And so this is what is creating the complication in eastern and western and central Equatoria. And it is very unfortunate that the ordinary people of South Sudan get to fight each other when they really are victims of a problem that is a state failure. That is, they are victims of state and leadership failure in South Sudan. And this is part of the reason those of us in the PCCA and others who are in the nonviolent movement, we've been saying that we have a failed leadership and we have a failed government in South Sudan. And we deserve a better government. We deserve better leadership. And if we are not able to get that through the peace agreement and through other mechanisms, we should rise up and demand it. This is essentially the philosophy behind the PCCA. And so if we had a government that cares and a government that listens to us, things would be resolved before they happen. Say somebody reported a case in Eastern Equatoria and say, okay, there are cattle headers that have come to our area. We don't know who they are. They are heavily armed. We feel threatened by them. Can you talk to them? Can you do something? Why are they here? That's a responsibility of the state to come in and say, who are you? Why are you here? Why you have so many weapons? And those people will talk. And you can make an arrangement and people will settle. We had a situation in 2009 where I don't know what they call them, those cattle headers from Western
Mbororo.
Mbororo.
The Falata.
They move throughout South Sudan. And they come and say, okay, we need, they said we need grass. We just, that's all we need. And people say, okay, you sit your cows there. We have no issue with you. You have no issue with us. So there were some few clashes here and there with Mbororo. They came all the way from West Africa, and we accommodated them. And Western Equatoria was one of the places where they were accommodated, and as well as Western Barghazal. And parts of Barghazal, they were accommodated there. They were able to move even all the way to the north.
They went up to Blue Nile. I saw them near the Mazin.
Yeah, all the way from West Africa. And they went back. They are not there to settle. They just want to keep their cows safe, find grazing areas, and then they go back to their original homes. This is a phenomenon in Africa. And because we had a state at that time, and our state was able to say, okay, don't fear these guys, let them move, don't attack them, and they will not attack you, we were able to coexist with them. So this is the center of the issue, and it is really sad that our people had to kill each other savagely in a manner that we have seen for no reason. There is no explanation. It's just that the state has failed to deliver on its responsibilities. That's why we are fighting. And so rather than blaming the Acholi people and the Madi and the Kuku in Kajukeji, and blaming the cattle headers who are facing those three major problems, where is the state here, which is supposed to regulate and improve and protect all of us? That's why we are putting the blame squarely on the government. But now we have heard that they want to move the cattle out of those areas, which is fine. But But they also have to make sure that if these guys go back to Bor, that they are also protected from the 3 diseases, the cattle raiding, the floods, and the disease. If you cannot solve those 3, they will be back because they don't have other options. And so let us find a long-term solution. And the long-term solution is to have a government that cares, a government that cares. And the current government and our president has proven that not only does he doesn't care, he also encourages these things to happen because he doesn't act enough on time. We have seen this in Abyei right now. What is the reason the people of Abyei have to be subjected to this violence, both from the north and the south?
He even declared it, Abraham, in the meeting in Bor, at the Bor Peace Conference, where he said that if you are attacked and you are afraid to fight to defend yourself, don't come to me. What kind of head of state would say such a thing?
Yeah, exactly. So, Abraham, let me stop there. I think I have talked too much and give a chance to
Good. Well, yeah, thank you very much. You both, Professor Jok Madut and Awolich, have explained this adequately. The challenge is that we have these issues happening all this time. There are quite clear indicators that there would be problems, and that problems are happening and people are dying, but the state doesn't come in. Now, the unfortunate part is that we may still see these issues happening. Either these communities will fight again, or if they go back, they may get attacked, and the same cycle will continue to repeat itself. And when you ask about where the state is, you only see the state when people say enough is enough, and we're marching out to the streets to say enough is enough. That is when you will see deployment of forces and tanks and all these things on the streets of Juba. If these forces are there, and these are state institutions meant to protect the people, where are they in the protection of people? To prevent this kind of crisis, So it is very painful to see how the state completely fails to stand up to its responsibilities to protect people, and then leaving people in this state of nature that Professor Jok Madut talked about. And as he also referenced earlier, I think it is time for us South Sudanese to decide to say enough is enough to this state failure, and we need an arrangement where the state delivers adequately on its responsibility to manage conflicts, but also protects all citizens of our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamandis. Dr. Madut, let me then go to the next. We had seen a few weeks ago the issues between Twin Mayadit and Abyei, the Gangok. These two communities are two sisters, are brothers. They marry, they have blood. And if I'm mistaken, what happened a few weeks ago had happened before between these two communities. And we have seen the violence break out, many people die. So can you talk more about these issues, what's going on between Abyei and Twitch? And I have seen in diaspora, Abyei's son and daughter, and Abyei's son and daughter from Twitch, they divided themselves. There's a war of words in social media. So what is going on between these two communities, and how this conflict can be done? And what advice you have to give to these two communities in back home and diaspora?
Okay. No, I think you are right in saying that the victim of this conflict, apart from the people on the ground who are dying in this conflict, and the property be destroyed. The part of what is disheartening is the quick divisions that you see on social media, especially among the diaspora, where the people of Abyei and people of Ngok have taken sides automatically without even a hint of reflection on the history that used to unite them. And they are, I mean, even people who are intellectuals and respectful people on social media very quickly declaring the other side as enemy and completely oblivious to realities and to the facts of history and to the facts of social order. People are simply taking sides behind their own communities, which is a symptomatic once again of the fact that South Sudanese have not been imbued with a culture of loyalty to the nation, and instead people are members of their tribes first. And this is again a fundamental failure of leadership, because the sense of belonging to a nation is something that it's a project that is a responsibility of a country's leadership. And this has not been done. When South Sudan became independent, we never asked ourselves, what kind of country is it going to be? With the multitudes of ethnicities and sectionalism that exist, what is it going to be like? We never asked ourselves this. If that question had been asked, there would have been a project that gives people a sense of collective belonging, that we are all citizens in this country, and that a sense of pride in the nation makes the nation be above everything else. You can be multi-identity, but the nation should be at the top, and everything else subsequently. What happened in Abyei is simply mismanagement of people's relationships, of communal relations. What happened, at least as to the extent that I understand it, because it is complex, is that there were a lot of people from Abyei town and from Abyei proper, from Ngok Dinka, who were displaced when it was attacked by SAF in 2008 and then in 2011. And some of these people who fled from Abyei went into areas further south across River Kir, areas that were inhabited by Abyei, but also other areas that were inhabited by Twitch. And then they have been there now going to 15 years, after which they began to feel like they were already at home. There's no need for them to return. And they wanted to make sure that land where they were living is officially become their home. And some elements in Twitch, including parliamentarians from Twitch area, some of you may have seen that document which was signed by parliamentarians from Twitch area, saying that making the land available to Ngok people to inhabit forever is not going to be acceptable to them. And that is what triggered the actions of the commissioner of Twitch area, showed that he basically decided that over our dead body, will the areas inhabited by IDPs be made their own? This was a simple thing that could have been resolved by sitting down and discussing it. But they inflamed it with very passionate and emotional statements coming out of the mouths of leaders. And what you have, there is clash. And those clashes have led to formation of vast militias of Twitch people attacking Abyei and Ngok people from the south, at the exact same time that there are some elements of SAF, of South Sudan Armed Forces, including some Twitch people who work for Masiria on the northern side, attacking Ngok people from the north. In a sense, Abyei currently is squeezed between Twitch and the Masiria, aided by Sudan Armed Forces. I think as a country, we have failed miserably to govern something, to manage something that could have been contained in no time, especially that there are historical connections between these communities. If you, those of you who speak Dinka, will have heard all kinds of jokes and legends and stories of the interaction between Ngok and Twitch. Two communities with such histories should not have been allowed to slide into this ghastly conflict, which is going to shatter that amicable history which both of them have lived through. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jok Madut. Awolich?
Well, thank you, Professor. I think you had articulated the issue very well, and you probably have more advantage in terms of knowledge of the local situation there. What I can say, however, is that all these localized conflicts that you understand are part of the broader political conflict in South Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
President Salva Kiir has fallen out with prominent ABI leaders, among whom Deng Alor, Lino, Edward Lino, Luka Byung, Piang Deng, and others. Even though Piang is still in Juba, there has been a consistent marginalization of the people of Abia since the conflict that happened in 2015. The prominent Abia leaders who were part of the SPLM have all been squeezed out of the political landscape in South Sudan. And so if people of Abia were still prominent in the government, and that President Kiir still considered Abia as a priority of South Sudan, this violence would not have occurred. And so it would not have happened. So I am saying that this violence is happening not because some people in Abia decided to gazette the Anet and Agog or Agog area, which could warrant conflict, obviously, because land is something that can be disputed. But I'm telling you that it is part of the broader conflict, and there has been a movement toward marginalization of the people of Abia. And if you remember, Dr. Barnaba in 2017 or 2016, it was 2016, was fired because a statement of our Ministry of Foreign Affairs has indicated that the people of Abia are foreigners and they are Sudanese. They should not be part of South Sudan. That statement did not come from Dr. Barnaba. It reflected the sentiment of President Kiir himself. And this is part of what has happened that has created the situation that we are facing now in Abia. Majority of South Sudanese people are sympathetic to the people of Abia. They understand that the people of Abia remain in an uncertain political environment. Neither the Sudanese government cares for them, nor the Southern Sudan government caring for them, because the Abia remains a contested area. And for a very long time, we have not heard anything about Abia for a very long time. And in fact, it doesn't make sense that any commission related to Abia, that a son of Abia is put in charge. In my view, that is basically saying it is your issue, you go and deal with it, when it is in fact a South Sudanese issue. We could pick somebody from Kajukeji to deal with this fire. It is a national fire. Or somebody from Raja. It doesn't have to be someone from Abia. When you are dealing with the Abia administrative areas, sure, fine, you can pick people who are from Abia, but Abia file is a South Sudanese file. So anyway, so in addition to what Professor Jok has said, what is happening in ABI is part of the toxic political environment that has been created in the country. President Kiir is bitter toward the people of ABI because of Deng Alor and others who have played some political role in the country that President Kiir is not happy with. And as a result, the people of ABI are suffering as a consequence of that. And ABI has been lowered in terms of the priorities of South Sudan. It is very low as a priority right now. And when we talk about the issue of ABI, it is by the way. It is no longer a central political issue in the country. And it was not even on the radar for a while until Deng Alor came back and they had to recreate a new file. Personally, I think that is a betrayal of national issue. We are betraying the cause of the people of ABI, and we are betraying the interests of the people of South Sudan for political reasons. And so the current fighting between the people of ABI and people of Twitch, those of us who are far away, it is hard to judge who is at fault. But what we can say is that the appearance from the rest of us who are part of South Sudan think that the Twitch people seem to be too angry at the people of ABI, and forgetting that ABI on the other side is in trouble. And a normal cultural reaction of people who love each other would have been, let us swallow this. Let us swallow this and protect our brother and sister until the storm is calm. And then we can settle the internal issue. And I think this is the only thing we can appeal to the people of Twitch, that this philosophy should apply. That the situation in ABI remains unresolved, that the Masria intend on robbing the people of ABI of their land. They don't even want the people, they just want the land. And that what would be the psychological effect of this violence now on the people of ABI? Some of them are going to say, maybe it is better to just even stay with the Jalaba, if our own brothers, because you know that an in-house fighting is always bitter, too bitter that it is better, you would even better make friends with an enemy. So it is important for our brothers from Twitch who are outside here in diaspora and also in South Sudan. They may be right. We don't know. We don't know the facts. But the appearance is that you are fighting the people of ABI at their weakest time when they need your support. Maybe the people of ABI might have provoked the conflict. We don't know. But the appearance is that they have a much bigger problem and we should protect them. And if we have an in-house conflict, let us settle it at such time when we have resolved the external conflict. I think that's the only thing I could say for now. Thank you very much.
I think even, Twitch people losing ABI to the north. Let's assume Khartoum wins and take ABI. It means that a Sudanese government, which is by nature an expansionist government, will be at the border with Twitch, and they will claim part of Twitch. We should think of ABI as a buffer, as a security buffer for the rest of South Sudan. There is everything to gain in keeping ABI part of the South, because Twitch would become next to the Jalaba in case they take ABI. Because even the borders, the southern borders of Ngok and Twitch are not very clear. The Khartoum government could claim even more into Twitch area. If they had already taken ABI behind themselves, they can go forward. Why do we not think of the future as a people? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jok, Usadu Rajab.
Well, thank you very much. I think my colleagues have explained this enough. I would simply say this situation we have is a general national crisis that we face, and this general national crisis poses existential threat to us as a nation and as people, and it needs to be addressed with urgency. We're not going to be solving this process, this national crisis in piecemeal. That now there is fire in Abia, we go and put off this fire. And then next we hear there's fire in Bor, then we go and try to put off this fire. We need to reconstruct the South Sudanese state to adequately address the challenges that we face. It's a national challenge that manifests itself in this different this different crisis, and it's so unfortunate that we leave a BA issue as a low priority, and these issues now escalate into what we see so challenging, and this all this need immediate attention. And because we believe the state doesn't have the will and the capacity now to really adequately respond to these challenges that affect us broadly across the country, there is need for us South Sudanese, people in Abia, people in Twitch, people in Pibor, people in Bor, people in Nimule, people in Tambora, and the rest of the country to collectively see the state as the man directly responsible for letting all of us down, and that we must unite to fix the state before these problems finish us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sas Rajamandis. My last, which is the last topic, which is I will start with Rajab. We have seen the recent incident happen in Northern Sudan between South Sudanese and some of the mob from Northern Sudan attack South Sudanese who are live there in Northern Sudan. And we have seen that there are some people lost their life. Can you tell us more about this? What happened? Because yesterday we brought one of the person who live in Khartoum, and he give us insight what happened really, and he even describe how the horrible life our people, South Sudanese people who live in Khartoum, they experience. So can you comment about what happening in Khartoum? Thank you.
Well, well, first of all, it is unfortunate that our people have been experiencing these challenges in Sudan, and especially the recent incident that happened in Khartoum. But primarily, the purpose for which we became a country was to take care of ourselves. Now, our country is unable to take care of ourselves as citizens, and this leaves us struggling in the neighboring countries. And so some of these neighboring countries have crises of their own, and by the nature of this crisis, we become victims. Secondly, as asylum seekers or refugees in some of these countries, and Sudan in particular, by all means, we're not a priority of those countries. And so in some cases, we end up in this situation. Now, this kind of challenges that we face, our people face in these neighboring countries, would be easily managed also if we had a state that constructively engages with these countries and effectively cares for our welfare in those countries, tries to ensure that our citizens are accorded the the respect they deserve. And so all these things boil down to what South Sudan can do to take care of its people. But what we could extend to the people of Sudan is that, we have been one country, and we are still tied by a lot of bonds as people from these two independent states. And so as citizens of South Sudan in Sudan, we deserve the protection of the state, and also on our own, we have a responsibility to ensure when we are in these countries that we protect ourselves and abide by the rules of these countries, so that we reduce the risk of such incidences on us. Now that this has happened, it should serve also as a lesson and give our state and the embassy in Sudan an idea of what they can do to ensure that our people are protected in Sudan. I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Jok Madut, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have much to add on this, other than to say, governments the world over monitor security situation in all countries where their citizens are living or traveling, and issue advisories advising their citizens to watch out. Our government has none of that, either because there is no capacity or there is no political will to be watching out for citizens of this country wherever they may find themselves around the world. A similar situation happened a couple of days ago in Nakuru, Kenya, where a group of young men, brothers, in fact, were attacked when their house was put on fire, and three of them just escaped through grace of God, and they are still fighting for their lives in hospitals in that town. But one of them died. These are all symptoms of a country that has driven its citizens out, having young people going to foreign countries to look for opportunities for education, for healthcare, and even for work. This is what happened in Khartoum. People will also recall that the Sudanese, over the last few years, have been issuing these videos published on social media describing their sentiments towards South Sudanese, where they say, how come you are returning here? Didn't you vote to leave? Why are you coming here? And these videos have prompted sentiments of antagonism and hostility towards South Sudanese, especially when the economic situation is becoming so dire in Sudan right now. The economy is really bad. The commodity prices are so high. People line up at dawn for bread in Khartoum as we speak. The result of this is that when you see South Sudanese living better than some of the locals, there rises a sense of xenophobia and antagonism, and it is, I'm sure, that those sentiments that led to this terrible attack where houses were destroyed, people were killed, it is a result of our country itself having failed to be a provider of protection and to encourage our citizens to stay in their country. Better to be poor in your country than to be vulnerable in foreign countries. But the situation in South Sudan has reached such levels where people can no longer stay. If you have a capacity or means to leave South Sudan now, a lot of people would leave. That is how desperate the situation has become, and I think again, like the kind of violence that is going on between communities, like the hunger that is engulfing, like the people fleeing the flooding without the state doing anything. Migration to foreign countries, neighboring countries, is a part of the fundamental failure of the state to live up to the aspirations of the people of South Sudan who voted in 2011 to become independent and who contributed to the liberation dating back almost 200 years. We've been vying and hoping and praying for a country of our own. But once we achieved it, it was squandered by the failed leadership of that country, resulting in us fleeing our country, even when it has. Like, just imagine, we still have how many millions of people living in neighboring countries? It's why do they have to live in refugee camps? Why do they have to go and live in foreign capitals? It's because our state has used the resources that could have been used for the welfare of our people, have been used to destroy the country, have been used in buying in arms to fight over political power. They've been used to enrich individuals who are in the corridors of power. And the result is that our people have nowhere to go but to become slaves once again in foreign countries.
Thank you so much, Professor Jok Madut. We have less 10 minutes, so we can close down our discussion. Abraham Awolich.
Well, thank you. To save time, I really have not I have not studied the situation in the Sudan closely, so I really don't have much to say. But to say that Egypt and Sudan, Egypt in particular, our people there have been subjected to a lot of challenges there, and as well as we have seen in the story that came in Khartoum of our people being treated unfairly. It is usually a normal reaction of citizens. For example, in our own country, a few years back when things were beginning to be a little bit difficult, a lot of people complain a lot about waywayers. And it's usually, even in the United States, sometimes when the economy is not doing well, the migrants are the victims. People think that they are the ones that cause the difficulties. And so we cannot, that is not to say it is okay for our people to be mistreated, but to say that when you go to other people's countries, you are usually blamed for things that you have no control over. And so it is unfortunate and shameful that our people have to go back to Sudan to seek refuge, when in fact we have been living in refugee camps all our lives with the hope that once we got out of the hands of Sudanese state, we would be free. And so it is really very unfortunate. And my sympathies with the people who have become victims of these activities. One thing I have said, as we have said in our note to IGAD, is that even those people who are inside South Sudan live like refugees, because the state doesn't affect their lives. So you basically, you are stateless when you live in your own country. And so those pastoralists who move with their cows, and those farmers, and those people of Abyei, and others who are displaced by floods in a yurt, for example, we've seen images in the United States, and the state really didn't do much to help them. They are stateless technically. And so not only are we refugees in other countries, we are refugees in our own country. The people in the cantonment sites and the IDPs and others who are not even displaced, but the state is not there. That doesn't affect their lives on a daily basis. They are stateless. Somebody come and kill them, no one cares. Somebody loot their properties, who cares? And so we have failed really terribly. And when we say this, of course, people think that this is part of our propaganda. It is not. We are also citizens, and we want, the only thing we want is a better government for ourselves and for our people. That's all. But we are not getting that. And so until we are able to get that government that cares, we are all this story we are talking about now, we'll talk about it again next year, because it will never end until we are able to take matters into our own hands as citizens and begin to own our country. We behave in our own country as if the country is owned by the current leaders and they own us. And so it's like, okay, South Sudan belonged to President Kiir and Dr. Riek Machar and their allies. And us and citizens, us, they own us. No, that's not how it's supposed to be. We own South Sudan, and we own the power that they have. We gave it to them. We can also take it from them. So this is the situation that we are in. And so there are only two binary choices. It is either you talk like us and say, hey, we are dying, things are not working, or you keep quiet and die peacefully. Those are the only two options you have. And then those of us who have chosen not to die quietly, we will continue to make noise until things change. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Usas Rajab and Abraham Wallich and Professor Jok Madut Jok. We have 5 minutes, and this 5 minute lab, I want to give this 5 minutes to my co-hosts in Clubhouse, Through Africa, and then come if you guys have any question to my guests, you can go ahead and ask your question. We have 5 minutes left. Through Africa, are you there, or Denkamis? Yeah, go ahead. Denkamis, go ahead.
I do not have a question. I have a question being asked here by one of the viewers here. Let me see. Okay, let me go down to the comments. Peter Gong is the one asking the question. His question is, why would Abyei and Twitch be the only state or counties with the borders line in South Sudan? As far as we know, no borders have ever been drawn between any state counties in South Sudan. What is so significant about them? That's the question right there.
Okay. Thank you. True Africa, do you have anything to say? Okay, thank you. Okay, that's the question. So thank you, Denkamis. Yeah, go ahead. Did you guys grab that question? One of the audio who listening in Clubhouse has.
Yeah, there is nothing unique about the boundaries between Abyei and Ngok. It's between Ngok and Twitch. It's the same situation all across the country. It's just a matter of communities and leaders of those communities managing those relationships fine. But there is a potential for similar situation that is going on currently in between Twitch and Ngok. Could easily happen everywhere else. I mean, the whole Upper Nile is basically sitting on a time bomb when it comes to communal relations and the idea of the borders between communities. I think this issue of borders between communities is something that needs to be addressed very, very seriously by the Parliament, by the Council of States, and by the government. Because the threat is there that any minute it can erupt somewhere else.
Thank you, Professor Jok Madut. Do you have to add anything, Rajab or Abraham?
Well, I could say that that question is absolutely crucial. That there are no boundaries, there are no hard boundaries in South Sudan to trigger this confrontation. But I have already mentioned, as part of the answer to this, is that it is not only the the land demarcation that is the cause of this. It's part of the wider political conflict in the country. And there are people fueling it, taking advantage of the fact that Abyei is a low priority of the government, and therefore there is not much political attention being paid there. So there are local dynamics, some of which we are not so sure. It could have been that there are some people in Abyei who might have triggered this conflict. We really don't know. But there may be people in Abyei who may have triggered this conflict. We really don't know. What we do know is that it's a bad idea right now. There is no need to do this at this time. We should wait for the situation of Abyei to be settled so that we can, and there are courts also. Things like this, you could register a complaint with the court. And we had an opportunity in 2009, or whenever the Abyei arbitration thing happened, the Abyei Boundary Commission issued a document, a map of what Abyei was. And it was disputed between the Sudan and South Sudan. And then we went to the court of arbitration. So if there were complaints then, they should have been raised. But leave that aside. Now, Abyei is still a disputed area, and the arbitration has ruled what the state of Abyei situation is. And so even if there are some boundary issues which may be known to the local people, nobody would dispute that this is everybody has a claim to some territory. You could wait. You could wait for that. You could make a formal complaint and register it with the courts and with the Council of State and say we have a dispute with Abyei on this boundary. In case Abyei people choose to be part of North Sudan, this thing need to be part of the discussion. But right now Abyei is in a bad shape, and we could simply let it go. We could swallow that until we are able to resolve the much bigger problem. I think that's all we can say. But there are no hard boundaries now inside South Sudan to warrant violence. Thank you.
Thank you. Usara Rajab, do you want to add something on that?
No.
Okay.
On that.
So my last one you guys need to is about can you guys update us about how is the stage of your colleague Kula Kwal in the prison? So how is he doing?
Well, yes, thank you very much, Abraham, for that important question. It is important for the people of South Sudan to know that Kwel has been in jail for 8 months. He was arrested on the 2nd of August, 2021, and he remains in jail now. He has not been formally charged with any crime, although we have read the human rights reports in which the state claimed to have charged Kwel with some crimes, but those charges have not been formally presented in court. And so you cannot say he has been charged formally. And so it is a violation of our agreement, of our constitution, to hold somebody for more than 3 months. You cannot do it 24 hours, but if the court warrants you to extend the arrest because of the gravity of the situation, you can hold somebody for up to 90 days with the court, and that has to be done every month. It is not 90 days straight. But Kwel has been in jail now for 8 months, and Kwel is not doing well. He has some medical complications, and he's and these medical complications, he has been referred to an external medical doctor to take care of him, especially in I think in Lebanon or in Khartoum, but he's not been allowed to to go. And so Kweli is being held for political reasons by President Kiir, fearing that if Kweli is released, Kweli will overthrow his government, something that is impossible to do by somebody who is in jail. And so Kweli is in jail. He's now in the central prison in Juba, and his medical condition is not good. He's not eating well. He's an elderly man, and he cannot eat beans and rice every day in jail, which is what he's eating, and he's not allowed to get food from his family, even though his family is there in Juba. And he's not a criminal. He has not murdered anyone. And so this is part of the leadership failure that we talk about, and we demand his immediate release because he has not. The other time we heard a funny story that the government told Quill that you call those of Rajab and Abraham Awolich to come back to Juba, and once they come, you will be released. Now, what kind of madness is that? There is no shared crime here. Quill could be charged in the court in his own accord. If they have any crime that they have, they should take him to court. We can, if they want to arrest us, whenever we come to Juba, we will be arrested. If it means 10 years from now or 15 years from now, it doesn't hold the justice of Quill being done right now. There is no such thing in the law. Leave alone the fact that we have no crime we have committed in South Sudan. And so really, there is no case against Quill, but President Kiir has refused to release them. And we do talk to him through third parties. People go to visit him, and we get informed about his health. And so he's not doing well, and he should be released immediately. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe just a small additional comment. You know, since Kwel were with us together signed the declaration of the People's Coalition for Civil Action, until now, thousands of South Sudanese citizens have died, and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, got displaced. And the suffering of the people has increased. If the government had listened to the voice of Kwel Agwer that time, we would not have the situation we have today in Abia. We would not have had the hundreds of people who died in Yambio, dying of those violence, the people killed in Baidit and different parts of Jungle Estate, the issues in Magui and the rest of the country. Just because the government doesn't want to listen to the voices of reason, when people say the situation is not good, that's why we have all these challenges going on without being addressed. And it is extremely unfortunate that someone who just simply said things are not right for our country and they need to be addressed gets to be detained the way they are detaining Kwel Agwer. There is absolutely no reason for that. You know, if we want to solve the problems we have in the country, we have to talk about these issues. And bringing these issues to the attention of the South Sudanese public and the government, the way we did in a public declaration, is not a crime. And we would call on the authorities to honestly listen to these voices. And if they do not want to listen to these voices, we will continue to face what we are facing now in different parts of our country. These issues must be addressed. And the best way to do that is to talk to ourselves instead of refusing to listen to ourselves. And anyone who talks about the challenges that we face and calls for a change in the situation gets arrested the way Kwel Agwer is being detained. That is so unfortunate of the South Sudanese state and leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jok.
I don't have anything more to add.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming in. I appreciate them. For those of you who are listening in Clubhouse, thank you so much. And also thank you for those of you who are watching on Facebook and YouTube. And I would like to say thank you, Professor Jok Madut Jok, Usar Jamandis, and Usar Abraham Awolich. Thank you for coming in tonight. This is a wonderful discussion. And I would like to say have a wonderful night. And I will see you guys back again next time. Thank you so much for
Thank you so much.
spending these couple hours with me. And
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Good. See you again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you. Thank you, Corbino. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, guys. People in Clubhouse. Thank you. People on Clubhouse, sorry, I will not bring people active, you guys. Peter, then come in and do everybody, you guys can. Thank you guys. Have a good night.